All right. Thank you, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. First, I want to make sure that everybody knows that this event is being simultaneously translated in Spanish. Este evento está siendo transmitido en vivo en español. Para usar este servicio, oprima el botón al fondo de su pantalla y seleccione español. Le damos las gracias a Betsy Chávez, que nos ha dado la interpretación esta tarde. So I just want to take a chance to thank Betsy Chavez for offering our audience a live Spanish interpretation this evening. As Zoom participants for this webinar, we invite the audience to submit questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We encourage you to submit questions and upvote the ones you'd like answered. We'll get to as many as possible after the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Omar, and thanks everybody for being here today. We are, and Omar, if you can go to the next slide. We're here tonight to talk about the economy and housing, the intersection of economy and housing. And we all know how the price of housing impacts our own personal finances and how our housing experience can either build our personal wealth or our generational wealth or make our lives even much more difficult. But what we're here to talk about tonight is how housing intersects with our local economy and our regional economy more broadly, how it impacts our workforce on a larger scale. So I am going to, with that, go ahead and kick it off because we have lots of great panelists today. And we're going to start with Adrian Covert. And he is going to give us a regional perspective on housing, after which we will have a panel of 5 local folks, local economic leaders, and then go to a Q&A at the end. But since we have lots of people, we're going to really jump right into it. So I'll introduce Adrian. He is the Senior VP of Public Policy for the Bay Area Council. With a background in political science, Adrian has championed a broad number of initiatives, including climate mitigation, resilience, energy, and homelessness. His advocacy has led to successful state legislation and regional ballot measures. Adrian also contributes to Santa Rosa YIMBY, a great partner of ours, and has authored the book Taverns of the American Revolution, which I think sounds pretty compelling. In real alignment with Gen H, he's dedicated to creating equitable and vibrant communities, and we are really happy to welcome him here. Adrian, you can take it from here.
Great, thanks so much, Jen, and thank you, Gen H, for putting this together. Excited to be here, always happy to talk about housing wherever I can. So I've got a presentation that I'm going to walk through fairly quickly. So hang with me while I share my screen here. And do you see, let's see, do you see some campers and RVs?
Yep.
Okay, great. Then let's get started. So I'm going to talk about 2 things. The title of this presentation is the direct and indirect economic considerations on housing policy. So I'm going to briefly touch on the direct economic considerations around housing policy, but I really want to dive more into the indirect ways housing policy can affect things in the local and regional economy. So just to get the direct economic impacts out of the way, the home residential construction industry in California is a significant part of the workforce, right? This is about 5.1% of all jobs in California are in the home building business. So that's important to know because these are relatively good jobs. You're talking prevailing wage in our region of the North Bay around over $50 an hour. Obviously that, what the annual salary is depends on the pipeline of jobs that you have, but from an hourly basis, these are good jobs. There's a good multiplier effect here. So when people have a lot of construction jobs, they're more likely to spend their money at restaurants. They're more likely to buy clothes, buy presents for their family. That has a multiplier effect. So this is something that from a purely economic development consideration, we should be really encouraging construction jobs in our cities and in our counties and in our regions. The average salary, again, these are about almost twice as high as the average salary in California. However, one thing of note that's important to remember is that these jobs are actually declining in California relative to the rest of the United States. So they're up a little bit from last year, about 1.6%. That's about half of the growth you see elsewhere in the United States. Elsewhere in the United States, these jobs make up a greater percentage of overall jobs. And part of the reason for that is that housing today, we're building far less of it than we did in the past. So this chart shows the business cycle of California's home building industry since 1954. Every business has a cycle, and housing construction is no different. This graph depicts total units built, not per capita figures. So like any life cycle of any business, there's peaks and there's troughs. And you see this as we go through the decades, the kind of boom and bust or peak and recessionary cycles of the housing business. What really stands out here and should be a 5-alarm fire to any public policy person is that California's population has more than doubled since the 1950s. But today, our cyclical peaks are only building as many units as yesterday's recessions. The peak of our cycle is producing recessionary levels of housing compared to how we were building in the 1950s. So anytime anyone ever says there's so much building going on, they're just wrong, right? There's no nice way of putting it. They're totally wrong. The only way that they might seem like there's a lot building going on, because we are so used to now no building happening. But if you went back to, oh boy, hold on a sec. Sorry about that. That's my reminder to tell me to look away from my screen to save my eyes. But if you were to travel back in time to the 1950s and 60s and all the way up into the 80s, we're building very little housing. So is this happening elsewhere in the United States? The answer is kinda. This map or this graph shows the top 30 or so metropolitan statistical areas in the United States and the housing permits per 100,000 people that have been permitted in the past 20 or so months, all of 2022 and year to date through August of this year. And it's on a per capita basis. So you get a sense of relatively how much housing is being built. And California metro areas are, our biggest Bay Area metros are near the bottom. San Diego, San Francisco, Los Angeles, our big metros are at peak or at bottom performance relative to other metros in the United States. Some of the areas that are building a little bit more housing on a per capita basis, again, is Riverside, San Jose, and I threw in Santa Rosa, Petaluma into this as well, just to show. The best performer is the Sacramento area, which by all accounts, relative to any place else, they're experiencing a building boom right now, but relative to what else is going on in the United States, in Texas and in Florida, in Tennessee and Arizona, we're building nothing here, folks. Like if we really want to compete for the new economy, to keep young workers here, we need to build more housing and stay ahead of the game. So this is housing nationally. Let's take a look at more closely at low-income housing, because I think this is fascinating and alarming. This graph here shows very low-income housing units permitted and allocated through the regional housing needs allocation by county in the Bay Area. So the blue bar or the greenish bar represents how many very low-income units each county was supposed to have built according to the state assessments going back to 1999. And the orange bar shows how many units we actually built. And the aggregate is on the far right, 97,000 missing units of very low-income housing region-wide. You can see Sonoma in the middle of the pack there, built less than half the number of very affordable units it was supposed to have built over the past 2 decades. This is a chronic shortage, and it's going to lead to indirect economic impacts. So let's get into those. So first off, I want to say that a shortage of housing absolutely directly leads to increased costs on the available supply. This has been determined by the UC Berkeley Turner Center on Housing, the California Nonpartisan Legislative Analyst Office, and countless other reputable research organizations have all concluded the biggest factor that determines housing costs is supply relative to demand. In California, for decades, has been a high demand, low supply state. The results are plain to see. We are right at the top of median rents in the United States, second only to resource-constrained Hawaii. And this has pretty grave consequences. So the bar chart on the top shows poverty in the United States, broken down by state. That's in percentages. When factoring only in cash resources, so jobs, paying jobs, area median wages and income, California factors right around in the middle of the pack in poverty rates in the United States. We're a wealthy state. However, when you factor in the supplemental poverty calculation, which takes into account the cost of housing, we have the highest rate of poverty in the United States. So again, housing, the shortage of it increases the cost of the available units. That represents a greater cost burden on low-income families. That pushes more of them into poverty. Direct impact, highest poverty rate in the United States. So let's take a look at this chart. The impacts of this are not felt evenly, but impact Black and Hispanic families more than anybody else. So Black and Hispanic renters are most likely to be cost burdened by housing. This means they spend over 30% of their income on rent, or severely cost burdened, meaning they spend over 50% of their income on rent. And you're talking about 63% of Black households in California are cost burdened. That is extraordinary. 55% of Hispanic households compared to about half, less than half of white and Asian households. And then even more alarming, 37% of Black households are severely cost burdened, spending 50% at least or more of their income on housing. This is a huge red flag. And then white households are nearly twice as likely to own their homes than Black households in the Bay Area. So these are Bay Area numbers broken down into home ownership rates by ethnicity. This represents a huge missed opportunity in wealth creation for Black families and Hispanic families relative to white and Asian families. And so if you're spending over 50% of your income on rent, guess what? You are at the highest risk of becoming homeless. You are one unfortunate yet very common life circumstance away from failing to meet rent and ending up on the street. And so, shocker, surprise, surprise, California has the highest rate of homelessness in the United States. It's higher than other high rent states are also up there. You can see not far behind, Hawaii, New York, Washington. The cost of housing, in fact, is a better predictor on your homelessness rate than the prevalence of mental illness, drug abuse, or poverty. And I showed the poverty chart earlier, but you can see similar ones comparing substance abuse and mental illness. They have effect, obviously, on homelessness and the ability of your homeless population to recover. But when it comes to what's pushing people onto the streets, nothing beats the cost of housing. And this has huge costs elsewhere for local and regional governments. So the Santa Clara County analyzed a few years ago where homelessness costs were going within the county. They estimated that homelessness was costing the county about $520 million a year, which broke down to a cost of about $83,000 per homeless individual per year. But most surprising was that they found that over half of the cost was going to emergency health services. These are ER visits, right? And then about a third of the cost is the criminal justice system, police calls, people being arrested for intoxication, going through the judicial system. Only 13% of the full cost of homelessness is related to providing shelter, providing people job training, providing people routine mental health services or substance abuse services. So the takeaway here is by not providing housing, by not providing the services that actually help people, we're deciding that we're going to spend money here instead, in emergency rooms and in the criminal justice system. So any way you dice it, you're going to spend, just a matter of where you're going to do it. And then when it comes to health, this is directly related to the lack of shelter. California provides fewer shelter options than any other state in the United States. That's why we only shelter about 25% of our homeless residents, whereas the average outside of California is about 90%. And that's not because the weather's nice and we're turning away, homeless people are turning away shelter, although there are cases of that happening, no doubt about it. But we actually only have about 3 beds for every 10 homeless residents in California. So the inventory just isn't even there. And when you're out on the street, your rate of chronic disease, infectious disease, accidental death, getting hit by cars, physical assault, homicide, rape, all of it skyrockets. So that's why the average life expectancy for a homeless Californian is only about 50 years old, about 35% less than the statewide average. It's absolutely devastating, and it has huge costs. So let me just finish up on some good news. There is some good news. One of the silver linings that I see around California is with accessory dwelling unit policy. So since the passage of SB 1069 in 2016, this was a Bay Area Council sponsored bill to reduce permitting fees for accessory dwelling units and try to standardize that. ADUs have soared across the state. They went from about less than 1% of all new housing units in California to 15% in 2021. And some of the statistics coming out the past 2 years have shown that that's almost up to a quarter now. So accessory dwelling units have really emerged as a way to getting people housed, adding more flexible housing options, and most importantly, I think, adding wealth creation opportunities for Black and Hispanic households who haven't been able to monetize their properties like other people in California. And so in addition to this, some other legislative solutions that have been passed, SB 423, which liberalizes home construction across the state and reduces barriers to multifamily housing in particular, I think is very good for the state. So we're going in the right direction, but we've got one hell of a hole to dig ourselves out of, given what we've done the past 5 decades. So with that, I believe we're going to be not taking questions now. We're going to do the panel, but when we get to that point, happy to answer any questions that come.
Great. Thanks, Adrian. I really appreciate the regional overview, and we will come back to you on Q&A. And yes, we're going to wait on questions for now. And to those of you watching, you can add a question by hitting the Q&A box at the bottom. And with that, we will go on to our local business community leaders here. We've got 5 of them here who will each do a brief introductory presentation, and then we'll shift to questions to all of them, including Adrian. Reminder again about the questions, and I am going to kick this off by welcoming Ethan Brown. Ethan serves as the interim executive director for the Sonoma County Economic Development Board, or EDB. During his 11-year tenure, he has held multiple roles connecting businesses with resources, aiding them in regulatory navigation, market expansion, access to capital, and talent acquisition. Ethan has extensive experience in disaster and pandemic response. And before joining EDB, he co-founded a local general contracting firm. We're happy to have him. Welcome, Ethan.
Thank you, Jen. I must have sent you the wrong bio, and I'll mea culpa for that. We finally took the interim title off back in June, so I'll have to look at the version I have on hand.
They call you now the legit executive director?
It's legit now. They're stuck with me.
Welcome.
So, thanks for having me. The EDB considers 3 domains as being essential for a healthy and inclusive economy. Those include jobs and business development, education and workforce development, and the reason we're here tonight, housing and community development. And these domains we consider, pardon me, interdependent. If performance lags in one, it'll impact the other domains. Locally, housing is a critical piece of economic well-being and has a significant impact on these areas. In recent years, as we've seen housing costs rise, the effects have been especially felt among low and middle wage earners. That leaves less money for other necessities such as food and utilities and puts a bigger demand on the safety net. In a recent presentation given at our EDB Economic Perspective event, Dr. William Rogers from the Federal Reserve Bank introduced the framework of ALICE, which is an acronym for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, but Employed. He estimated that about 36% of the households here in Sonoma County are employed, but still struggle to pay for all household necessities. These households make difficult choices across the spectrum of their needs and often seek relief to supplement those needs. This, in turn, has an impact on businesses. While most of their income going towards basic necessities, these households have less disposable income, which weakens a community's collective buying power, having less to spend at local businesses. And while this will absolutely hamper economic growth, this is not the only impact housing has on local business. In 2023, the Workforce Development Survey sponsored by the Economic Development Board and Workforce Investment Board, employers cited housing and cost of living as one of their top concerns for workforce attraction and retention. You've already seen Adrian's slide on cost-burdened renter households. On the ownership side, while Sonoma County may have a lower median home sales price than the rest of the Bay Area, or most of it at least, it also has one of the lowest housing affordability indices of 18%. That means only 18% of Sonoma County households can afford the median priced home. That is lower than our neighbors in Contra Costa, Solano, San Francisco, Marin, and even Napa, and it's lower than the state average. Under these circumstances, it is incredibly difficult to attract and retain a local workforce, and the Public Policy Institute of California has cited the cost of housing as the prime driver of decisions to leave the state. Also in Adrian's slides, you saw which states are doing really well at housing production, and it's no coincidence that those are among the states where people are moving from California. In Sonoma County, we see population decline, particularly among those entering the workforce and of prime working age. Between 2017 and the present time, 8,500 of those aged 19 and under have moved out of the county, 9,200 between the ages of 20 and 39, and over 10,000 between the ages of 40 and 64 have left the county. And that's not all. Current projections for the next 5 years indicate that unless we take significant action, we'll see a continued decrease of over 18,000 residents among these age groups. The only age cohort here that saw an increase in population growth is retirement age residents, which increased 10,000 since 2017 and is projected to rise another 3,000 over the next 5 years. Even with those gains, the population here will continue to decrease. So yes, housing is the key component of retaining and attracting a workforce population, as a healthy economy requires a healthy workforce, and a healthy workforce requires access to safe and affordable housing. Back to you, Jen.
Thanks, Ethan. I appreciate that from the county perspective. With that, since we have a lot of people, we're going to move quickly. We'll move to Peter Rumble. Peter Rumble, hi, Peter, serves as CEO of Santa Rosa Metro Chamber of Commerce, focusing on improving the regional economy. His efforts include establishing a unique loan pool with Housing Trust Silicon Valley for affordable housing in Sonoma County, and lots of the construction you're seeing around here right now has that fund to thank. The Chamber also supports private sector investment in quality childcare and promotes cultural activities in Santa Rosa's downtown. With the background in health policy, clean energy, and public service, Peter brings a diverse expertise to the table. And on a side note, not for nothing, Peter was instrumental in the founding of Generation Housing. He was a volunteer member of the incubation team, a founding board member, and continues to serve on our advisory board. We thank him for that.
Well, thank you. That was generous and maybe a stretch of the truth for a lot of it. But want to thank you all who are tuning in and watching, maybe a recording later on, for taking the time out of your day to watch and to get our perspectives. And I appreciate the opportunity to be part of the panel to talk about how we see things at the Chamber. Maybe share more of a perspective, since we've got some compelling data already that really our perspective echoes. So Santa Rosa Metro Chamber is actually one of the larger chambers in the state, not just the North Bay or Northern California. And we work in a number of areas to support, promote, and advocate to create a vibrant, sustainable economy for all in our region. Over the last 5 years, we've taken on a lot of new work to carry out that mission. When I joined the chamber, I was coming, as Jen mentioned, from mostly a public sector background, although I had some experience launching a startup company. And I needed to take some time to understand what actually makes a vibrant economy. And I landed on a study done by the Milken Institute. And Milken takes a pretty heavy data approach to assessing the vibrancy of local economies, and periodically releases a ranking of cities of really all size. And the primary areas of analysis are housing affordability and availability, access to quality childcare and early childhood education, abundance of public cultural activities and amenities, and small business starts. So when we use that frame as a guide over the last handful of years, and now have tremendous programs and efforts in each of these areas that extend to all of Sonoma County, not just Santa Rosa. But on housing in particular, coming out of the 2017 fires, I convened the largest employers in Sonoma County to talk about what they saw as the greatest challenge to growth, expansion, attracting other complementary businesses in the area. And just as Ethan noted a minute ago, each of these, the banks, the hospitals, academic institutions, tech, manufacturing, they all called out housing as a primary challenge. And this shouldn't be a surprise, right? Without sufficient or affordable housing, how can employers attract or keep a strong workforce? Why would a major employer decide to relocate here, despite all the benefits of being here, without that availability of housing for its workforce? And if you drill down further into this, the ripple really keeps on going, not just today, but for tomorrow. If you're starting a family or relocating for work, one of the frequent questions you ask, right, is how are the schools? And I've said it before in other settings, and I'll say it here: how good of an education do we expect our kids to receive when our teachers struggle to keep a roof over their own head? If I had 20 minutes, right, we could go into the hard economics of this case, similar to what Adrian provided, but just at this level, you can see that there's a macroeconomic argument here through growth constraints and the availability of a strong workforce. But there's also a microeconomic argument to be made. In Santa Rosa, there's a lot of talk about downtown and how to build a more vibrant, exciting downtown, just as an example to kind of ground us here in the micro. And here too, I'll call out housing. The more that we can think about downtown as a neighborhood and build it out as such, the more easily we can achieve that vibrant downtown. The projects that are being built right now will provide a base economic activity that we can keep retail going with, to keep restaurants going, to provide business to the comedy clubs, the music venues, all of those things that we consider essential to a vibrant local economy. And we're seeing those kinds of businesses making more and more investment in downtown as more and more housing investment is being made. Project on 4th Street that's just about to open, multiple projects on Mendocino Avenue, multiple projects in Railroad Square, just to call out a few. And by the way, those projects produce a huge amount of revenue to fund public services that increase the quality of life for everyone, not just the people living in those new homes. So I do want to, before I close, I want to quickly mention what we're doing at the chamber to contribute to the solution, because anybody can talk about a problem all day and admire a challenge, but that doesn't really change anything in the end. The Santa Rosa Metro Chamber of Commerce is the only chamber in the country that I know of that is financing housing development. We launched the Sonoma County Housing Fund a couple of years ago in partnership with Housing Trust Silicon Valley, one of the country's most respected affordable housing lenders. Kaiser Permanente stepped up big to provide seed funding. And I'm happy to tell you, the first to hear it, that the Community Foundation has just made a significant investment in our housing fund. Since launching, we've financed 6 new projects throughout Sonoma County, not just Santa Rosa, throughout Sonoma County, providing homes to about 1,000 people in our community. Every home is at 120% AMI or below. So we're talking about housing our teachers, our first responders, our service workers, our small business owners, people who are the glue in our community. One of the projects is dedicated to seniors on a fixed income. So 2 quotes quickly that I like to share whenever I talk about the need for housing. The first is from the economist Ed Glazer, who's the author of a beautiful book called The Triumph of the City. We must free ourselves from the tendency to see cities as their buildings and remember that the real city is made of flesh, not concrete. The second is from former US General Shinseki. If you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. So I'll end on those thoughts that we talk about buildings and homes and cars and parking and economic good times and bad, but we're really talking about you. We're really talking about me, about individuals and families, and whether we are willing to do things differently to make sure everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. I appreciate that. Those comments. You know, I just came back from a really quick trip to LA, and I was in downtown LA, and I lived in LA for 11 years, but moved there from there in 2002. And in 2002, downtown LA was a ghost town at 5 p.m. Nobody lived there. Nobody was out. Nobody went out there. It was a place where people went to do business, and then they left. And it was truly barren after that. And now we're 21 years later, and it is a vibrant neighborhood that it's so exciting. And the thing that changed is right as I was getting ready to move, they started turning old buildings into housing, and they pulled that lever first, and there was only housing went in first. That was the very first lever they pulled, and it absolutely transformed a place, and it's super exciting. So I think we can learn a lot from LA, even though people here love to not love LA, but I'm gonna fly the LA flag for us here in Northern California. All right, coming up next is Kelly Bass Seibel. We welcome Kelly, who's the VP of Community Engagement for Sonoma County Tourism. She oversees sustainability, destination stewardship, and community engagement efforts. Her leadership in organizations like the Petaluma Health Center and the Santa Rosa Metro Chamber have been instrumental in creating important community programs, and her contributions have been recognized by California Travel Association, Green Destinations International, and the Western Association of Chamber Executives. Welcome.
Thanks, Jen. I've got a couple of slides, and so I think you all are going to share for me, which I so appreciate. Thank you. So appreciate both Ethan and Peter setting the stage, and I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about a particular industry that is one of the reasons that we all enjoy living in Sonoma County. Is a huge part of our workforce, is a driver of our economy, and is often not thought of as being a huge contributor because it's the places that we know and love. They just kind of exist in the fabric of our everyday, but it's super important to our economy, and housing of that tourism workforce, hospitality workforce is crucial to ensuring that that part of our economy can continue to churn forward. So with that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about who the workforce is. So we'll start with the first slide. So just to set the stage, about 20, it's actually closer to 22,000 employees in Sonoma County are in the leisure and hospitality sector. That's 1 in 10, 1 in 11 jobs. Before the pandemic, I could say with ease, it was 1 in 10, and we're still clawing our way back to pre-pandemic levels. But it's one of our largest economic drivers in terms of jobs. Next slide. Just so that you can see where they're distributed across the county. If you think about our tourism sector, this will come as no surprise that the unincorporated area has the majority of those jobs, but truly it represents jobs in every city in Sonoma County. Thank you. And then just when people say, well, what is a leisure and hospitality job? What does that mean? So we're talking about those service workers. We're talking about the people that are working in food service, our hotels, our tour operators, transportation, retail shops that visitors may shop in. It really does span the gamut. There are some of those jobs are skilled jobs, like being a chef, and some of them are those entry-level jobs that really teach really important soft skills or executive skills that are important to our workforce as a whole. And I know, I'm sure several of you on the call, if we asked if you've ever worked in any sort of hospitality job or any sort of food service job, you probably would raise your hand and say yes. I know my first job, I was a hostess at Applebee's, and quickly learned that those food service workers deserve to be paid more. And it's a sector that I'm pleased that I get to enjoy, but not work in now. Next slide. So one thing I just wanted to level set is when we talk about the wages, oftentimes I get asked, well, Kelly, aren't these mostly minimum wage jobs? And that is the case in some cases, but we also know that the sector is continuing to pay more because they have to. Particularly coming out of the pandemic, what we did see was that because people took time during the pandemic, maybe they weren't working on the weekends anymore, they were enjoying dinners at home with their kids. They really had to think about, when they were coming back into the workforce, where they wanted to spend their time. And so what that meant for our employers in the sector is they had to be very competitive in terms of how they were getting people back into the workforce. So while there's still room for growth for an entry-level job, and particularly with where minimum wage at the state level has really gone recently, I mean, fast food workers are now minimum wage of $20 an hour. So I am sure that our restaurants are going to come to meet that, because they will lose servers to go work in a fast food establishment if they're not paying that wage. I also just want to talk, Ethan talked a little bit about those that are leaving the county, and just want to talk a little bit about where folks are coming to and going to when they're living in Sonoma County, or where they're coming in for work. When we actually have counties that are producing employees come into the county, and if you look, it will come as no surprise, Grayton Casino, huge employer, but they are producing huge vehicle miles traveled into our county from other counties. We're seeing people come in from the East Bay, we're seeing people come in from Marin, Lake, Mendocino. Obviously, Cloverdale's got more folks coming in from Lake and Mendocino. But why are they coming in, and why are they not, finding a job in Sonoma County and then living in Sonoma County? I think we can draw some conclusions from that. We do see that we export more workers than we import, but if you look at where we're exporting to Napa, which is also those wage jobs. And we also, when we look at something like Petaluma is an importer of workers. Well, what is who is going to work in Petaluma versus Rohnert Park, where housing might be slightly more affordable? We're seeing more folks export from that. And there's a reason that I'm sharing this vehicle miles traveled data with you, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So we talk a lot about housing, and we talk a lot about the problems that it creates. And I want to just present two different scenarios that we've seen work in other parts of the country that I haven't heard talked about as much here. The one being, we talk about vacation rentals a lot, and I get often asked if vacation rentals are part of the problem. If we eliminated vacation rentals, would that mean that we would solve our housing crisis? The short answer to that is no. But there are some places where funding has been provided to provide incentives for second homeowners to rent their vacation rentals to the regional workforce. It has to make sense financially for that owner. So if you are able to rent your vacation rental out at $1,000 a night, 4 nights a week, you likely don't want to turn that. There's no financial gain for you to turn that into a rental. It also probably means you're operating a larger home. But if we have continued to see a softening in the tourism market this year compared to last year. We know that we've heard vacation rental operators and owners really feel the stress of both new regulations across the county, and then also being able to fill occupancy as compared to before. So there are a couple of places across the country that have put programs in place to provide funding to turn vacation properties into regional workforce housing. The second one is an offering on deed restrictions or mortgage financing support for second homeowners. So when around deed restrictions, there's a couple of places where the county has offered up deed restrictions to property owners of second homes. And for example, Vail, Colorado is one of those. So it's Vail Indeed is the program, but the town actually pays property owners for deed restrictions. And they've done 100, as of August, they've done 100, I cannot read my own handwriting. This is where we're at in the day, but 108,000 I'm so sorry, 65, average of $68,000 per deed restriction. And that has resulted in thousands of properties being turned into deed restricted for year-round workforce. Additionally, Placer County is providing 16% towards a purchase price of homes for regional workforce. You have to commit to working and living in Placer County, but the county is now matching dollars so that the workforce can come in and purchase funds there. And then the last one, it's not listed as up here as a case study, but Crested Butte, Colorado. They have really worked to have 25% of their deed restricted of their properties, their homes, be deed restricted for workers in that county. And they also have worked with local trade organizations to have students work on designing and building affordable housing for the workforce. And then that housing then becomes workforce housing specifically. So with that, I'll turn it over to the next panelist, and I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Kelly. And I'm feeling you at the end of the day too. I'm joining you in that. Especially when it's dark now. Somehow I don't know about the rest of you that I'm adapting. It seems much later than it seemed at this time just, a few weeks ago. I'm looking, yeah. All right. So next I'm going to welcome Pauline Block, a Sonoma County local who holds bachelor's degrees in business and an MBA. She manages marketing development for Cornerstone, focusing on housing projects in downtown Santa Rosa. Her work emphasizes affordable and sustainable housing, along with essential community amenities like childcare. Pauline also oversees the CoLab co-working space in Santa Rosa, where Generation Housing makes its home when we're not in our homes, and the Barn Artisan Project in Petaluma for our residency at the CoLab. And they are excited, I think, Cornerstone, about contributing to the region's economic and housing development. So welcome, Pauline.
Apabsolutely. Thank you. Good evening. So I get to talk about some of the reasons why you're seeing these charts that Adrian's showing and some of the things that Peter was talking about. So I'm going to start with talking a little bit about the challenges of building, especially in downtown. I'm going to really focus on Santa Rosa because that's where we've been looking, and then talk a little bit about the potential opportunities with an enhanced infrastructure finance district. So we know that building housing in Santa Rosa, as we've heard, is difficult, comes with hurdles, especially in the heart of the city. So when it comes to downtown, I want to start with a few good things. There's some really great opportunities that can accelerate projects, get them closer to financial feasibility, and create that really vibrant hub that I think we all really want to see in downtown for multi-living housing and multi-family living, and just for us to be able to visit ourselves. So some of these include the new policies and incentives that were adopted in the 2019 Downtown Station Area Specific Plan. A large portion of the downtown is in a qualified opportunity zone. The creation of the Renewable Enterprise District and the Red Housing Fund, and the community benefit districts, which provide maintenance and cleanliness in the districts, as well as enhanced safety. So with that said, navigating the market in downtown's urban landscape is still a very challenging task. So it should come as no surprise that the forefront of developer concerns right now are capital expenses and the increased risk associated with borrowing. Given the current interest rates, both financial institutions and investors are a little more cautious about shouldering some of the added risks of our evolving market here in the North Bay. If you propose a 8 or 10-story building, they're going to walk into downtown, look around, and say, "Where's my comps? How are you going to show me the proof of market?" So we're really lucky that we have organizations like the Chamber and Gen H. They have done a fantastic job of presenting a very compelling case for housing in the region, but still the hard numbers and kind of what you see on the street can paint a very different picture. One of the things that we've looked at a lot, and I know a lot of developers in the area have seen some advantages with, is working with local and regional banks who really understand the region. They've placed their businesses here and have a strong tie to it, and really have a better awareness of the opportunities for growth here in the North Bay. So that is an opportunity in that area. And then prior to the pandemic, the economic landscape was comparatively more stable, but still came with obstacles. And so those still remain today, even post-pandemic. So penciling a pro forma here in the North Bay, is much more challenging than denser cities such as Oakland, San Jose, a lot of our neighboring Greater Bay Area cities, where the rents are higher, but the construction costs are the same. So building up here is the same cost as building in Oakland. And sorry about that. And actually can sometimes be higher depending on the labor side, because we're building, if you're building mid or high rise construction projects that haven't been built in the North Bay, there may be a lack of skilled labor and expertise to make those happen, which can increase that pro forma gap. So these are short little segments. So that's kind of the high level, but in summary, high interest rates, caution by financial institutions and investors, lack of proof of market, greater cost here for not only materials but labor, and gosh, these scammers at night. And then the rents that are a little bit lower than the Greater Bay Area all contribute to some of the obstacles for developers in, I would say, all of Santa Rosa, but specifically downtown. So I'm very encouraged by a lot of the city's developer-friendly policies. They've worked really hard in making incentives to pull development into the downtown. I mentioned some of those at the beginning. And we are seeing some projects come out of the ground, so I'm very optimistic about it. But those are some of the things that really, I think, have been pushing projects to take a little longer than expected. I'm going to touch on the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing Districts, so EIFD for short. You may be hearing that. So these are financed through tax increments generated from the growth in property taxes from a specific designated boundary. So it's important to note these are not new taxes. There's no new taxes generated from the formation of an EIFD. They are just a portion of the tax increment from the area. So since we can see that there's a surge of housing projects, hopefully, on the horizon for the next 5 to 10 years, the demand for the infrastructure upgrades becomes increasingly more apparent. And so the establishment of the EIFD is really one of the only potential sources of public funding that can make a significant impact on the downtown and really support the viability of the projects that are proposed and future projects that may come in. An example I like to talk about is the Mendocino Avenue and Santa Rosa Avenue corridor plans. Those were created in 2009. They really enhance all the modes of travel in and out of downtown on both sides and create increase pedestrian safety, create more of an identity that match the neighboring, the neighbors, and attract residents and visitors to and from the downtown. There's a lack of public funding to complete these upgrades, and the EIFD that's an example of something that would be an opportunity for the EIFD. It also has a really strong potential to pull external investors into the downtown, which obviously we know creates a huge ripple effect, boosting employment in the city center, can increase future sales tax revenues, and just an overall positive impact in creating that really vibrant community that we talk about. And not to mention, totally a different topic for another day, but that strong urban core being the center of everything for a region. So it's a big task, the EIFD. The city and the county have to work really closely, and I really applaud the work they've done so far. It's put a ton of time into it. And currently the Public Financing Authority, PFA, has been established, and they're meeting to create the Infrastructure Financing Plan, IFP, which will be the list of projects that hopefully can be funded through the formation of the EIFD. So I'll stop there and pass it back to you, Jen.
Thanks, Pauline. I appreciate that. I know this is complicated stuff to do at a really high level, but I think that's important, and areas we can drill down further a little bit in the Q&A and later as well. I'm going to move on to last but not least to Al Lerma, who is the operations manager at Mitote Food Park. You've probably seen him there, and if you haven't been there or haven't seen him there, then you definitely want to visit in Santa Rosa. And Al brings over 3 decades of leadership experience in economic development. He has successfully directed new programs and initiatives for the city, for the county, and for state public agencies. He serves on the boards of Sonoma County Hospitality Association, CAP Sonoma, and the Cresser Capital Fund, and he leverages his expertise in public finance and economics from none other than Indiana University, where I also attended for law school. It's rare that I get to share the screen with another Hoosier, and of course, our song of the day was a nod to our shared Hoosier background. So I will welcome you, Al.
Great, thanks. Thanks, everybody. I know you shared quite a bit of information and data tonight. I did have a couple of slides. Maybe we can run through them. But as Jen said, I work with the Mitote Food Park. I'm wearing a couple of hats. One is with the Mitote Food Park as an employer, and the other is with the Sonoma County Hospitality Association. So I'll let you flip to the next slide and just keep talking here, trying to move things forward. And so with the Mitote Food Park is a business in the Rosen section of Santa Rosa. We're a fleet of about 7 or 8 food trucks that employ a little over 60 people in the Rosen section of Santa Rosa. We feed a lot of people. We opened in the middle of the pandemic. We were feeding essential workers, at least that's what we were calling them during that time. But they're really the folks that make up this community, construction workers, people that do landscaping, people that do clean houses, that do a lot of maintenance work in the community. And we continue to expand, and we've been successful with that food park over the last year and a half. But the main reason I wanted to speak tonight was to really say that probably the most important issue we face is housing, and in particular workforce housing for those 60 plus individuals. So it's very hard to employ those folks that tend to be on the lower end of the wage scale. And so it's been very challenging. We continue to offer employment, but housing is first and foremost at the top of the list. And so shifting to my hat with the Hospitality Association, we are an advocacy group. We support advocacy for a number of issues, and particularly housing. We provide education and training resources. As Kelly mentioned, we represent a kind of a broad section of businesses here in Sonoma County: hotels, restaurants, food and beverage, vacation rentals, wineries, cultural activities, tours, transportation, outdoor rec, destination retailers, you name it. So we represent a pretty significant chunk of the workforce in Sonoma County. So our members and our employers are really feeling this challenge of providing housing and workforce housing to really provide support our workforce and provide a vibrant economy in Sonoma County, because it's a significant part of what we do here. Hospitality, as Kelly mentioned, and others, service and tourism as well. So I'm going to flip to the next slide. And these are really kind of the main pillars of advocacy, if you will, that we are focusing on with as an employer, and also with the Hospitality Association. So housing is at the top of that list, workforce housing. So we really are supporting what Jen H has been doing and all the others on this panel tonight. And really the thread that runs through all of these points here on the screen is housing. Getting things streamlined, permitted, workforce development. Our workforce can't survive, particularly in those sectors, without affordable housing. Homelessness is a huge challenge that's really pulling us down. We really are supporting solutions to improve that and solve some of those issues. Quality of life, again, without housing, our workforce, really can't exist, and we're losing folks, as I think Ethan mentioned and Kelly mentioned a little bit too. We're certainly supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion here. A large chunk of the hospitality and tourism workforce is from the Latino community, and they struggle to find, really housing that they can meet their needs here in Sonoma County and really stay here. If we lose our workforce, we're going to take a major hit with our local economy. So we want to make sure folks can survive here. And I don't know what the solution is. I would say, do we raise wages to meet the cost of housing, or lower the cost of housing to meet the wages that people are being paid here in Sonoma County? And I think, tourism and destination marketing are bringing folks to the area, but we need to make sure that our workforce has, that housing to be able to survive and support our local economy. So we think, the health of that economy is really tied to that housing and everything behind it. And so, and I'll leave you with a sports metaphor, since Jen played a soundtrack by Indiana Hoosier John Mellencamp. But I'm a basketball nut. I went to Indiana. We lost one of the great coaches in basketball yesterday, a guy named Bob Knight. He pioneered something called the motion offense, and the principle behind it is to keep moving, to be constantly moving, to be passing, to be pivoting, to be getting around any obstacles in your way. And so I think the challenge we face is to have that and apply it to our housing. If you ever watch the Warriors, that's the offense they run. They're constantly moving. They don't let anything stop them. And I think we want to support what Gen H is doing and others here. So we want to keep moving. We don't want anything to stand in our way. So I think we need to be in motion. We need to be advocating. We need to be constantly supporting our workforce and all the other challenges that everyone here on the panel mentioned tonight. And so with that, I'll kick it back to Jen and maybe take some questions. Thanks.
Thanks, Al. Thanks everybody so much for your remarks. And we have kind of an intimate group here tonight. Maybe that's a change in seasons and the darkness, and people are sleepy. But I think you guys did a great job and great overview. And I think to a certain extent, we have some agreement on this, right? I think throughout the community, and it's more now about what how we tackle that. But I do have a few questions, just since we have a little bit of time. And I want to start with Adrian. You know, we don't get a whole lot, we Generation Housing, we don't get a whole lot of pushback. But one of the things that we do here is that we should advocate only for deed restricted affordable housing. But we don't, we advocate for housing at all income levels, if it meets our criteria overall. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to the impact of market rate housing on the whole housing system and overall affordability.
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked. You absolutely have to build market rate housing. If you care about affordability up and down the spectrum, you need market rate housing. If you don't build market rate housing, a couple things are going to happen. One, the people who can afford the market rate housing, they're not going to move away. You know, if their job is there, their job is there. What they're going to do is they're going to outbid people for workforce housing, what was formerly workforce housing. They're going to move in, they're going to put in the granite countertops, they're going to put pavers in the front, in the driveway, and they're going to invest in the property. And the workforce family, the working class family who was in that household are either going to do one of two things. They're going to move to a more affordable market and then drive and commute in. That's more cars on the road, worse air quality, more misery for them, having to endure a soul-sucking commute from another county sometimes. About half of the Bay Area's workforce has to cross a county line to get to work. This is madness. People should be able to live near where they work. And if you give them the opportunity to do that, they take it. But we're not giving enough people that opportunity, and we're forcing them to endure horrible commutes. And they're saying, enough with it. They're going to cheaper states. That happens way too often. We need to do something about it. The other thing that happens is that they become homeless. When there aren't enough naturally affordable homes in the market, some people move, but some people will relocate to a tent. That happens. It happens to about anywhere to 0.5% to 1% of households in the United States and California, where we have about 40 homeless people per 10,000 residents. We're at the absolute highest in the United States, and that is directly related to our inability and refusal to build housing adequate to demand, and the impacts that has on cost. It also does another thing. By making housing artificially scarce and increasing the cost of it and increasing the cost of land, suddenly you've created this huge homeless population or high needs population, and you've made it more expensive to house them with subsidies. So you're creating a problem at both ends. A bigger population needs subsidies to stay housed, and your dollar goes less far in California than it does elsewhere. So just one point, a unit of permanent affordable housing, permanent supportive housing for homeless residents is about $600,000 statewide average. Now in San Jose or in San Francisco, it's closing in on $1 million. In San Jose or in Santa Rosa, it's closer to the state average, but it's still higher than that. So probably around 650. So when you've got that big of when solutions are that expensive, you can't subsidize your way out of it. There's not enough money out there to do it. And the Corporation for Supportive Housing, who is an advocacy group that is one of those supportive housing, subsidized housing only type of groups, their estimate is that it would take $70 billion to solve homelessness through that strategy. Do they have a plan to raise $70 billion? They do not. So what are we going to do about it? I think what we need to do is reduce the number of people who need subsidies in the first place, and you do that by housing abundance.
Thank you. Thanks for that. I appreciate that bigger view. Also on the bigger view, both Peter and Ethan have jobs in general kind of local economy, but have both made some important investments and created some important strategies around housing. In fact, I think I got talking to a Midwestern friend, a very progressive or liberal person. I said something about the chamber and she sort of rolled her eyes. And I said, oh no, this is not your normal chamber. They host the Pride Parade and they advocate for childcare and they directly invest in housing. And so if you could just talk, you did a little bit, but talk a little bit more in terms of like future economic development, Peter, about why you would actually make the very unusual investment of creating a funding source for housing. And then Ethan, corollary also, just talking about why housing has become such an important strategy for the EDB.
Yeah, well, fundamentally, and I appreciate the call out that we're not your average chamber. It's I get the same eye rolls as well, locally as well when I travel. Not John Boehner's chamber is what I often say, although that reference is slowly losing its traction. But in any case, so on a very sort of fundamental self-interested perspective, we're representing our members, and our members need people living close by so they can have a workforce to continue to operate, right? We have hospitals who are oftentimes buying homes so they can get a traveling workforce just to stay a portion of time. And wouldn't it be better from everybody's perspective to be able to not have to travel throughout the United States to try to find some employment on that workforce side? And wouldn't it be nice as an employer not to have to try to coordinate that and buy sort of single family homes and units? So all of the employers that we were talking with, and this is exactly the same thing as Ethan called out, kind of doing the same exercise, right? Is housing scarcity is our biggest economic challenge, right? And if you put that in perspective, right, it's not sort of financial risk, it's not finding customers, it's not marketing, it's not R&D, it is housing. And for a business that is not your typical thing that you would point to. So for us as a chamber to be able to represent and meet the needs of our members and meet the needs of our community, all right, we decided that we needed to do something. What that something was entirely unclear at the beginning, right? We tried to put round pegs and square holes for quite some time to try to bring large employers to make direct investment in housing projects, to try to get an institution that only knows, for example, manufacturing of heart devices to start investing in housing. It was a pretty big leap. Similarly, our financial institutions, they knew loans, but that was their business. So why would they do something that might compete with their business? And so I looked around to find new models to bring the private sector to the table, and came across Housing Trust Silicon Valley. And they were open to a partnership and trying to do something new because it met their mission needs of serving the entire Bay Area, not just Silicon Valley. And just I don't know if it was luck or just one of those times in life where you run into smart people who are willing to take a bet on you, and here we are.
Thanks, Peter. Well, we certainly appreciate your willingness to be bold and innovative and do something new. Because I think, everyone on the screen has probably, for the past several years, heard lots of people talking about the housing problems, but not seen as much action. Not as much action as talk just yet. Ethan, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, Peter and I find ourselves sharing a lot of the same concerns and partnering quite a bit. And so, beyond just echoing what he says, I'll try to add some value to that. But I mean, the role of economic development is really to create a vibrant economy that benefits everybody within a given community, right? And what we're seeing here is that folks are getting left behind by dint of just not being able to afford a rental property or enter the ownership market. And as we've heard from just about everybody here, the net effect of that is that our employers are suffering, right? And so, and at the Economic Development Board, is the entire time I've been there, we've been focused on business success. And so we've heard from numerous employers, just as you heard Peter say, that is their number one concern, is housing right now. So, when we went to the board to create sort of our work plan, housing was front and center. We're not going to become a housing advocacy organization, but we are in a unique position to support organizations that are out there and be a resource where we can. And so, I'm happy to be part of this conversation. I'm happy that there's a growing awareness that this is a critical need. And it'll remain something that the Economic Development Board is focused on.
Great. Thank you, Ethan. So I'm going to ask just one more question. We just have a few more minutes, and I'm going to have to steal about 2 of them to talk about our policy solution package. But the one more question, and you can explain it or you can just shout it out, and I'm just going to write it down. You're just helping us do our job. Is from your and Kelly mentioned some cities who are doing some real innovative things around second homes and incentivizing their use as housing. To the rest of you, and to Kelly too, if you have any others in your professional research, in your relationships, even in your travel, what cities are you seeing that are doing it right? Where should we be looking? Besides downtown LA, because I called that one first. I'm ready to write these down.
I'll say, I'll jump out there and say Minneapolis. The Minneapolis, St. Paul, Twin Cities area has, a few years ago, they streamlined their housing permitting process. They made all multifamily by right, I believe. Don't quote me on it. I'm kind of piecing together some fuzzy recollections here, but I'm pretty sure what they ended up doing was streamlined permitting, ministerial approvals for all multifamily housing. They eliminated parking minimums. And what they've seen was a surge in production, and rents have fallen. It's become more affordable. Homelessness is one of the lowest of any metro regions in the United States. That's a good, and it's been vibrant. They concentrated on building out their downtown with multifamily housing, and it's increased vibrancy of their urban core. So I'll throw that out there as a success story.
Great, thank you. They've certainly been on the forefront of the exclusionary zoning discussion and changes, but also, I think, really boldly talking about its origins, which I think has been cool. Any others that you want to just throw out?
I'll plus one on Adrian's. We've got developers who are active in both markets, there and here, and they frequently tell me about the difference. How about that? There are good policies coming out of San Diego, Jen, as you know, for sure, looking at creative solutions to what seem like intractable problems in California.
Yeah, they do seem to be a model. Well, I'll add one to the list that I just visited a couple months ago and was quite surprised when after not having been there for 10, 15 years, and that is Salt Lake City, which is this really cool, that's part very much surprised me, very vibrant downtown. It was always beautiful and like nestled in a beautiful space just like we are, and it's not much bigger than the city of Santa Rosa, but it is a really exciting, cool place to be that also has just these amazing bike lanes, green protected bike lanes, and public trans, and what I see are some modest size, but throughout the urban core, multifamily housing developments that have gone up in the past decades, and I think they've done a pretty good job getting pretty close to functional zero, as well. But not just because I would love a paid vacation with this fun group and anyone else, but I think it would be great to do a field trip to places like Salt Lake or San Diego or maybe Asheville, North Carolina, or places that I think seem to be kind of new places and lots of new urban core housing, and maybe we could learn from those folks, because it's a hard one. All right. Well, I will thank you and very much for your contributions tonight and your contributions every day on this issue that is really important. And it looks like all of a sudden I have just 1 minute, so I'm going to take 1 minute and then and we're going to go 1 minute over and give Omar 1 more minute, and just talk about our North Bay Next policy solution platform that we would love for folks to sign on to. It just has 5 action steps that are on the next slide, to eliminate exclusionary zoning, to streamline, make things fast and more fair in terms of development by folding DRBs into planning commissions, to incentivize affordability by changing the fee structure so that affordable housing and workforce housing, that 80 to 140 AMI that serves lots of our workforce, is not saddled with high fees, at least for this period of time that we are under the weight of high interest rates. And then to prioritize people and planet over parking, and not eliminate parking, but eliminate parking mandates and let developers figure out what kind of parking they need for their development. And then last is to ask all our jurisdictions, and we're asking all 10 of our jurisdictions to do this, to bring millions to the North Bay for housing development by signing on to the Bay Area Housing for All regional bond measure. That would be $403 million for Sonoma County, and that can be leveraged up to 10 to 1 for housing development. So it is a huge game-changing bond. And there are ways that you can help us get this done right now. You can use this QR code real quick to add your name to sign our petition. That will go to all 10 jurisdictions saying we like these policy proposals. We think we need to act and not just talk, but actually do some different stuff. So you can do that QR code, or I think there's a link in the chat. You can also do this QR code or link in the chat, or go to our website to add your name directly to the regional bond measure to say we support this regional bond measure, which is, by the way, just $100 a year for $1 million home. So if you got $1 million home, you probably can afford $100. That will help spur our local economy in the way that our presenters just talked about today. So you can say yes to this, and we appreciate your support. And I'm going to hand it over to Omar to wrap it up, hopefully just 1 minute late.
I think so. So just last thing, we really want to thank our panelists again. We really want to thank everybody who was able to join us. I really want to take a chance to, excuse me, I want to take a chance to thank our members who joined us. Our members are what allows us to do what we do. We encourage you to join us at a level that is personally meaningful for you and that is accessible to you. Anyone can become a member for as little as $5 a year. We also want to thank our catalyzing members. They were here. There are who continue to support our work annually and help keep the momentum rolling. And finally, a huge thank you to our founders who took a huge leap of faith at the beginning of our creation and invested in us. We'll be posting a video recording of today's webinar on our YouTube channel in the next few days, so please share that with anyone who wasn't able to join us. We hope this has been an informative experience for you. As always, stay safe and healthy, and we look forward to seeing all of you again soon. Have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.